So yes, today we are talking about spinach. Spinach is a very easy crop to grow. That said, if you are looking for any kind of information on it, we do have a good section on it here in the Kansas Garden Guide, which is my go-to source for a lot of these webinars because it's just got all of the key information that we kind of need to highlight. If you do happen to have a copy of the Kansas Garden Guide, it is pages 176 through 177. If you don't happen to have a copy, you can get the free version online at this link that's listed here, or you can just search Kansas Garden Guide and you'll be able to find it. So yeah, spinach overview, very hardy crop, very easy to grow, but it is a cool season crop. So that's the biggest thing that you have to keep in mind because it does not perform well in heat. As soon as it gets a little bit too hot outside, you're going to start to see bolting. You're going to start to see it going to seed. And then the crop itself is not going to be very high quality. The leaves are going to be kind of ratty, and they may be a little bit leathery and tough as well. So it's just not going to be really desirable at that point. That said, when you do have it growing during the cool season, it can be a continual producer for you if you are harvesting it correctly. So there are two methods of harvesting your spinach. You can either selectively take leaves out, that's where it's going to be your continual producer, or you can actually just cut it flush at the base. Then you are eliminating the whole plant, so you're not going to get that continual um, harvest from it. But it is possible. So some other factors to keep in mind, it can actually perennialize, so we will talk about that. And it does have a lot of summer alternatives. So if you really love spinach and you want something similar to it, you can actually grow some crops that are very similar to it during the summer that can handle that heat. So first things first, looking at your varieties, you're going to see something listed as Savoy when you are choosing the type of spinach that you want to grow. Savoy is specifically referencing leaf crinkle. So you're going to have smooth leaf to semi-Savoy to Savoy. They all ultimately serve the same purpose. They taste the same. They're all spinach, right? But as far as the benefits that the different types of varieties with that leaf crinkle offer, they do differ a bit. So some varieties will grow more upright than others, in addition to having Savoy. And that stature and that Savoy, they are going to dictate how dirty the crop gets and how well the crop can handle weather. So your uprights, those are going to both shake off the dirt a little bit better, and they're going to be able to handle the colds well, a little bit better. But that said, your Savoy also will mitigate the cold because it's going to create pockets of air around it. It is also, though, going to encourage dirt because those sprinkles, it's going to catch the dirt then rather than letting it fall off. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're choosing your varieties. You know, the maintenance, specifically after the harvest, is going to be your biggest thing, and protecting it from the cold is going to be the biggest thing. Too much cold. They do like the cold, but they don't like the frost. So as far as planting times go, right now, spring in the spring at least is mid to late March. This is when you want to get it into the ground. You want to aim for your varieties that are quick to mature, specifically because we only have so much time for them to grow in the spring before it gets too hot and they start bolting. That in mind as well, you can look for varieties that are heat tolerant and bolt resistant. So those would be ideal to be incorporating in the spring just because the weather obviously can be a little bit unpredictable. You know, one day it'll be perfect and the next day it'll be 95 degrees. So we have to keep that in mind and try to accommodate that with our variety selection. Then when you're looking at fall varieties, these will be planted in mid-August to early April, or early April. I apologize. That should say September. And you want to aim for varieties that are, again, heat tolerant, and specifically heat tolerant at germination because it's going to cool off as the season progresses, but heat tolerant at the time that it is planted because it is going to be in that peak of summer heat. That's what you're going to be wanting to look for. And I mentioned that overwintering spinach is a possibility. So with this, the ones that you are planting in the fall, in addition to having heat tolerance, they need to have strong cold tolerance because these are the ones that are going to be held over across the winter. Um, and there's just a few different factors that you need to keep in mind. So you obviously don't want to harvest the full plants because then there's nothing left there to keep growing. So these are the ones where you'd be harvesting the external leaves and then leaving plants at the end of the year for those to then rest through the winter. You want to lightly mulch these or cover them to insulate. So these ones in this photo actually are in a bit of a hothouse, but You can cover them with a layer of, maybe 3 inches of straw. That would be great. Or even, some kind of a tarp or a sheet. Maybe not a tarp, that would cook it a little bit too much, but just something to keep that insulation and stale air on top of it. You would do this in November, and then right now in early spring is when you would uncover it again and allow it to start growing. Couple things to keep in mind. If you do overwinter your spinach, it's going to vigorously regrow. So it's going to come back right away, but with that, it's also going to be quick to bolt. So you're going to have a strong initial flush. Just don't expect it to stay around too long afterwards. As far as your plant spacing goes, you want to plant your seeds in rows that are 5 inches to 6 inches apart from each other. That's about how wide the plants will ultimately get. And then space your seeds about 1 inch to 2 inches apart. 1 inch to 2 inches apart. You will see on seed packets sometimes that they're saying, plant it a foot apart, plant it 2 feet apart. That's really when you're wanting to get individual plants in there. But honestly, when you're trying to grow mass amounts of spinach or bulk amounts of spinach, you can kind of try to consolidate that and grow them closer together. They don't compete against each other too horribly. Also keeping in mind that thinning will be a thing. So you can go in to thin your to thin it so that there are 5 to 6 inches between your plants. Or this is when you would start doing your selective harvesting. So if you aren't harvesting the entire plant at the base of the crop, you can go in and take those external leaves out. And doing that thinning, you are going to encourage that space between the plants so they can continue to grow, and you don't necessarily have to be removing plants that are producing for you. When it comes to crop rotation, Swiss chard, beets, and amaranth are the biggest ones that you want to not be planting your spinach in right after one of those have been planted there, specifically because they all kind of encourage the same pests. They all are somewhat related to the amaranth family, and we'll talk about that in a second here. But because of that, yeah, same sort of issue. So every 3 to 4 years, that's the ideal crop rotation cycle that you would do there. As far as your care considerations, so growing them, you want them in fertile soil, but it also needs to be well-draining soil. Remember, these are leafy greens, so a lot of nitrogen is going to be necessary to encourage that green growth and that photosynthesis. And then supplemental water is not usually necessary, actually, with your specifically grown spring spinach, because spring spinach is growing at a time when we are getting spring rains, right? So that supplemental water not usually necessary, but you do want to keep a bit of an eye on it. As far as harvesting goes, I mentioned this a couple times already, but again, you can sever it fully at the base and just take the whole plant at once, or you can selectively prune those outer leaves, and then the rest of the plant will continue to develop. It's very similar to harvesting kale or something along those lines. Um, you do want to also keep in mind that uh, the hot weather will ruin the plants eventually. So keep an eye on the hot weather. If there is a week where that's coming up and it's late spring and it's going to be 90 degrees for an entire week, it's probably time to just go ahead and harvest the entire crop at the base and get as much of that final flush out of there as you can. So I mentioned there are several summer alternatives, and these include goosefoot, auroch, amaranth, New Zealand spinach, and Malabar spinach. Most of these are in the amaranth family. And that said, a lot of them are very close to being weeds. And I talk about that a bit in this slide. So your goosefoot, you may recognize it as being lamb's quarter. They look almost identical. They are a little bit different, but essentially almost the same thing. Same with your amaranth. That's very closely related to pigweed. So the biggest thing you have to keep in mind with these is you do not want them to go to seed, and you have to stay on top of them so that they do not become invasive or infest your garden. That said, there is some you know benefits to being able to grow this because it does love that summer heat. Um, that said, when you come to varieties specifically, these do not have a ton of varieties available because they are such, abnormal things to be growing in the garden. But you do want to try to look for your culinary benefits over your ornamental benefits. Your amaranth specifically, there's a lot of ornamental varieties that are out there. So look for the ones that are good to eat and not just showy. As I mentioned, can be aggressive in the garden. That includes your goosefoots, your amaranth, and your aurochs. Just don't let it go to seed. Um, and then also keep in mind that the leaves are best harvested when they're young and tender. So your older leaves, those can be used as cooking greens, but the young tender greens, those are the best ones with these summer alternatives. Then, as far as your common spinach concerns go, aphids are really the biggest ones, and you can keep track of these with neem oil and insecticidal soap. That's one of the benefits of this being such an early season crop is that the insects really aren't out there yet. That said, you will have some just environmental issues. Again, the bolting is a big thing. It's going to try to go to seed very quickly once it starts to warm up. So you need to try to choose resistant varieties, plants early in the spring, and then you can even cool the ground with mulching and watering as well, and try to somewhat mitigate those heat issues. But that will only last for so long when it does start to get hot outside. Uh, and then poor germination in the fall is also a factor just because there is those high temperatures that you're trying to get it to start to grow in. So it can be hit and miss whether you can actually establish a fall crop, but not impossible. You may just have to try to aim for a week where it's abnormally a little bit cooler outside. And something fun before I hand this over to Chelsea. Spinach was actually the first frozen vegetable ever sold. It was created by Clarence Birdseye in 1930 when he introduced it in cohesion with the concept of flash freezing, and is was a method of preserving the quality of a crop that had never really been seen before. And it kind of dramatically changed the entire way the world consumes a lot of vegetables. The spinach specifically became a lot more popular because it can last a lot more longer. So something interesting for the month. And I will stop my share here.
My name is Chelsea Reinberg. I'm the Nutrition, Food Safety, and Health Agent. So I cover all things of once you grow it, what do you do with it, and how is it nutritionally beneficial for you, and other food preservation concerns. So why should we eat spinach? Because it makes you big and strong like Popeye, right? I think the cartoon, and I could not actually get a cartoon of Popeye because of kind of rights and can't use the image without seeking permission. But we have the little sailor hat there and our can of spinach. So yes, spinach is a great addition. However, it's not going to quite make you big and strong like Popeye, but it is a super nutrient rich food. It is low in calorie. It is antioxidant rich, which is going to support our overall health. And of course, it is loaded with vitamins and mineral. There is a little bit of protein. When we think about big and strong, it's typically protein that is going to be most beneficial for your muscles. So there is a little bit of protein, but again, not going to give you that muscle mass as Popeye, but it is going to keep you nice and healthy. And so the other reason why need to eat spinach is we really do need to get adequate vegetables every day. And in previous presentations I've done, I've kind of shown the chart of where we're at with how much we should be consuming versus what we actually consume. And our vegetable consumption is very much below recommendations. And so this table here is from the dietary guidelines, and it kind of gives you, and from my plate, and it gives you just an example of how much we should actually be consuming of our vegetables. So we have toddlers there all the way up to seniors at 60 plus. And so for the average adult, it's anywhere from 2 to 4 cups of vegetables every day. If you think about what you had yesterday, did you meet that 4 or 2 or 3 cup maximum of what you should be getting? There really is no maximum. So that's the great thing. We can eat above and beyond because these vegetables typically are low calorie, have lots of nutrients in them for us. When we talk about leafy greens specifically, though, like a spinach, there is one thing to consider when we look at cup equivalents. And so because of leafy greens typically have a little bit more volume and they're very light. And if we think about 1 cup of spinach, if you've ever measured 1 cup of spinach, you know that it really doesn't accumulate much unless you pack it in because of how light and airy it is. So when we talk about cup equivalents, I do want you to remember for leafy greens, whether it's spinach, kale, arugula, any of those greens, it is 2 cups raw and 1 cup cooked. So that is your equivalent when we think about how many cups of vegetables you eat in a day. Spinach is great also because when we think about a raw spinach salad, we really can pack a ton of vegetables in that one salad by not only the spinach, but all the additional vegetables and even fruit you may add to your salad. So here's kind of a side-by-side equivalent when we look at 2 cups raw versus 1 cup cooked. And what you'll notice is that the 1 cup cooked has more nutrients than our 2 cups raw. And if you've ever cooked spinach before, you will quickly realize that you think you have a lot of spinach, but then once it cooks down, it's actually not that much. And so when we think about cup of cooked spinach, it actually took quite a bit of raw spinach to get to that point. So it probably actually took about 4 cups of raw to get to that 1 cup of cooked. So you'll see there just the comparison of we have our calories, the protein, we have our fat and carbohydrates, our fiber, and some of the other key nutrients here are iron. And so iron is really important for our blood cells. Calcium is really important for bone health. We have vitamin K, which is really important for blood clotting, vitamin A for our eyesight, vitamin C for our health, and potassium, which is good for heart function. The one thing, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but really the only nutrient that is not higher that you can kind of see is that vitamin C. And that's because vitamin C is a water soluble vitamin. So when you cook it, you're actually losing some of that vitamin C. But you can see all the other nutrients and vitamins and minerals are actually higher in 1 cup of cooked versus 2 cup raw. So if you are trying to get the most bang for your buck when you think about nutritionally, eating cooked spinach might provide you with more depending on the quantity that you consume than raw spinach. So the health benefits of spinach, there's been a lot of different studies that have looked at the health benefits of spinach. And what some studies and research have shown is that regular consumption of spinach, this typically means every day or having a large portion several times a week, may improve heart health. And this is because of the nitrates that are found in our spinach. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of that. But what it does is it helps to relax the blood vessels, allowing for better blood flow and ultimately better heart health. Decrease oxidative stress. So every day we are exposed to things that cause our body stress, whether it's driving in traffic, whether it's the smoke that we just had recently from the Oklahoma fires, that is kind of causing oxidative stress on our body. So we are exposed to environmental, food, internal stressors. And by eating these antioxidant rich foods like spinach, it can help to decrease that oxidative stress, meaning that our cells are going to stay healthier longer. It can reduce inflammation. Chronic inflammation has been associated with pretty much every type of chronic disease, from heart disease to diabetes, cancer. And so when our body is constantly inflamed, it does not help us improve our health. It actually makes our health worse. So by regularly eating spinach, we can have a reduction in the inflammation due to, again, another antioxidant, quercetin. It can improve eye health. Spinach is very rich in vitamin A, which you saw on the previous slide. And part of those components of the vitamin A that's found in spinach is lutein and zeaxanthin. And these are really important for eye health, specifically prevention of macular degeneration, which is a common disorder that many older adults face. It's just that the eyes don't work as well as what they once used to. And so by having a diet rich in spinach, it can actually improve your eye health, which typically you've always been told to eat carrots for your eye health, which is true because obviously we know that the orange color is where some of that vitamin A lives. But spinach has these other important vitamin A components of lutein and zeaxanthin. And then again, that oxidative stress, the reduction of inflammation, all of those may help to prevent certain cancers. So there's a lot of great benefits by regular consumption of spinach. And not to, there's a lot of studies that look at consumption of raw spinach versus cooked spinach, but ultimately just consumption of any form of spinach is going to be beneficial and it help you improve your health and stay the healthiest you can be. I do want to talk about a couple considerations when consuming spinach. So if you have a blood clotting disorder and you are taking blood thinner, it is important that you talk to your doctor before you just start going and increasing your spinach consumption. As I mentioned before, spinach is very high in vitamin K, and vitamin K helps to it helps with the blood clotting. So if you're taking a blood thinner and you need to be concerned about blood clotting, you do want to make sure that you're not consuming foods that are high in vitamin K or significantly increasing it at one time. So you do want to talk to your doctor if you have those concerns before you start to increase that spinach consumption. The other consideration is that spinach is high in oxalates. And so, not to go into too much kind of scientific background on oxalates, but basically all you need to know is that they're components that may cause people who are at increased risk for kidney stones or have kidney issues to have more complications with that. And so if you have kidney stones or kidney issues and you've been told by your doctors that you should limit oxalate foods, spinach is going to be one of those. Oxalates also, whether you have kidney diseases or issues or not, can interfere with the absorption of nutrients for anybody without health concerns. So you and I, if we consume spinach, we actually might not absorb as much calcium and iron. So let's say that spinach has 4 milligrams of iron. We may actually not absorb all that because some of it is bound up by those oxalates. The good news is that oxalates are water soluble. So consuming a cooked spinach where you boil or blanch it is going to reduce the oxalates because they are water soluble. So they're going to leach out into that water. And then you'll just make sure you discard that water after you boil or blanch your spinach. So that is a couple important things to keep note of as we talk about kind of special considerations if you are going to start to increase your spinach consumption, or if you just regularly consume spinach right now, understanding that there are oxalates and they may interfere with some of that absorption of some key nutrients. So here is just a chart of a study that was done to, again, bring that point about looking at raw versus cooked spinach on the oxalate content. And so raw spinach and versus steamed and boiled spinach, you can see that the oxalate content significantly decreased from taking raw spinach and then steaming it. And steaming it still uses water, but it's actually not submerged in water. So there is less leaching that happens of those oxalates versus boiling that spinach directly in the water, where you're going to have the most oxalates that leach out into that water. So again, just to kind of emphasize, if you are concerned about oxalates, if you have been told by your doctor you need to make sure you're not consuming a lot of high oxalate foods, but you still like spinach and want to consume it, you may want to consider just making sure that you're doing boiled spinach instead of the raw to reduce how much oxalates are actually being consumed. So as I mentioned before, boiling does have some losses of other vitamins, such as vitamin C, and then some of our B vitamins, which are both our water-soluble vitamins. Therefore, when you boil it, you're going to have most of those nutrients are going to kind of go out into that water. However, no matter what method we use in cooking, there is always going to be some type of impact on nutrients, good or bad. So although we're going to lose some of those vitamins like C and B, it actually increases the bioavailability, meaning how much our body actually absorbs of carotenoids. So when we have our increased vitamin A, so those lutein and zeaxanthins, we are better able to absorb them after they're cooked versus the raw. So again, there's going to be no perfect method of cooking. It really depends on what your goals are and what type of nutrient needs and support you need. So you might lose a little bit of vitamin C, but those carotenoids or those vitamin A content are actually more absorbed by the body after cooking. And then another key thing with impact of different cooking methods is acid can help iron absorption from some of those non-heme iron sources like our vegetables. So for example, we know that spinach has iron in it. However, to better help our body absorb it, you can make sure you add an acid. And that really happens by adding that in our salad dressing. So making a homemade salad dressing and using some vinegar, apple cider vinegar, white vinegar, or even some lemon juice or lime juice is going to be able to help your body absorb some of that iron a little bit better. So storing spinach can be stored 3 to 7 days in the refrigerator. Some longer, it really depends on your storage method. You do want to make sure that you keep it unwashed. Most produce, typically any type of fruit or vegetable that doesn't have a really hardy, sturdy outer coating is going to deteriorate quite quickly when it's exposed to water. So we want to make sure that if you have spinach and you're harvesting it fresh from your garden, try not to wash it until you're ready to use it. And then you want to store that in the refrigerator. Making sure that our refrigerator is 40 degrees or less is really going to make sure that that shelf life is longer. Even if your refrigerator is set at 43, we know that those few degree differences can actually shorten the shelf life of produce that's stored in the refrigerator. And then, you do have your crisper drawer, which is for better climate control, making sure that that has an appropriate temperature as well as that moisture control. And then the one thing with spinach is you do want to kind of store it in an open or perforated bag. It just allows for some of that airflow to happen and it prevents it from having too much condensation, which again, we know that water can help and quickly deteriorate how much our produce is not lasting in our shelves as long. So talking about preserving now, you can home can your spinach. However, there's a couple things to consider. You do need to pressure can spinach as it is a low acid food. We know that acid is what is necessary to only do a water bath method. The other thing to consider is on average, you need 18 pounds of spinach to equal 9 pints, which that's a lot of spinach because we know that spinach doesn't weigh a lot. So thinking about trying to harvest 18 pounds of spinach in order to get a few 9 pints of jars is going to be a lot. But if you do choose to use this method, you would wash and drain and you'd make sure that you kind of cut off any of the extra stems. And you're going to place 1 pound of greens at a time in a cheesecloth bag or a blancher basket. And you do need to steam in advance. So you're going to kind of steam those for about 3 to 5 minutes or until it is wilted. The salt is optional most of the time with most of your vegetables when you are doing a home food preservation method like canning. Salt is optional. You can certainly leave it out and salt after during the cooking process if you choose to. You're going to kind of fill the jars loosely with greens and you are going to add fresh boiling water. So although you steamed it, you do need to make sure you're using different water than the water that you were using for the steaming. You want to get that fresh, clean water. And then you're going to leave 1 inch of headspace. The other thing that's challenging with preserving spinach using the pressure canning method is it takes a long time. So you can see here, it's about 70 minutes and 90 minutes for pints and quarts respectively. And so that is a long time just to be processing some spinach that you know is going to wilt down quite a bit anyways. However, this method is available. This is an approved method, and you certainly can use this for home canning. The other two methods that we'll talk about is dehydrating and freezing. And so dehydrating, you can dehydrate spinach. There's a lot of what we call like the super greens that are out on the store shelves where you buy basically a powdered mix of different dehydrated greens and vegetables, and you put them in your beverages to get some of your nutrients, which you can make your own at home. So you can wash and drain these, and then you're going to want to do the same thing of steaming or blanching the spinach, and then you're going to dip that spinach in cold water to stop the cooking process. We don't want it to cool to room temperature though, or colder. We want it to be slightly warm to the touch yet when we are starting that dehydration process. So you're going to then drain your greens and you want to kind of squeeze them to remove excess water. The more water that is in your spinach, the longer it's going to take to dehydrate and kind of get it all out. You're going to then arrange your spinach in a kind of a single layer. We don't want to double stack them. We want to make sure that they're just evenly spaced and dehydrate for anywhere from 5 to 10 hours. Now, the benefit of going on the lower temperature range of that 100 is that you might preserve some more of those nutrients because some of those nutrients, like our vitamin C's and things like that, are also heat sensitive, where too high of a temperature might eliminate and reduce some of those vitamins quite significantly. So you can dehydrate for 5 to 10 hours, depending on if you go on the lower end or the higher end of your temperature. You do want to watch the greens closely at the end though, because the dry time, they will burn and scorch quite quickly when they get to that almost dry temperature. How you know when they are fully dehydrated, your spinach should be brittle and crumbly when it is fully dried. Again, you are going to lose some of the nutrients because of that process for the heat, but you will retain some of those nutrients as well. And so this is a good option if you want to add and have dehydrated spinach. You can kind of crumble it and put it in soups. You can add it to smoothies. You can add it to dips. It's kind of a great little alternative, and it's easy to make at home yourself. And then the last method is freezing. If you have a surplus of greens and you're just tired of eating spinach from your garden or you can't quite keep up, this is an easy method for preserving it because you can kind of also work in small batches. So you're going to select your young, tender green leaves. That is going to be the best for preserving for freezing, or really for any food preservation method. And then you want to thoroughly wash and cut off the stems. You're going to blanch them and you're going to then cool them in. So you blanch them, meaning that you're going to put them in a hot bath and then put them in a cool bath to stop that cooking process. You're going to cool, drain, and package them, leaving a 1/2-inch headspace, and then you're going to seal and freeze. Personally, I like to freeze my spinach in quantities that I'm normally going to need. When you buy spinach from the grocery store, they just have a big kind of bag of 14 ounces or 10 ounces. But you can freeze in like little ice cube trays, or you can freeze in, they have like silicone kind of 1 cup or 1/2 cup measurements. And so it's really nice to then you can just kind of take one of those cubes and you know how much it is that you're putting into your food. Frozen spinach, when you do thaw it, you're going to want to make sure you drain out and squeeze all that extra liquid out. And it's usually not a 1-to-1 fresh versus frozen. So, for example, if you're doing something that requires fresh spinach, as we talked about, when you cook some spinach down, it's going to be significantly less in volume. So, just keeping that in mind, if you're substituting frozen for fresh, it's not going to be a 1-to-1 equivalent substitution. So to wrap up here, we have a few recipes here. Last year we participated, the Master Food Volunteers participated in the Lenexa Spinach Festival, which is always a fun time. It usually happens in September. I can't recall the exact date right now, but it's early September. So if you love spinach and you want to be part of that, it is a fun event. They have lots of different activities, and the Master Food Volunteers will be there again this year doing some food demonstrations and things like that. So last year we had this spinach apple cake that we entered into the Lenexa Spinach Festival competition. And so here you can just see the ingredients. It has spinach, eggs, vanilla, a little bit of lemon juice, which helps with the flavor and keeping the color of that spinach nice and bright green as it's being cooked. Applesauce, sugar, apples, flour, baking powder, and salt. And there's a couple different ways. You can either cook it in a normal 9-inch round cake pans. You can cook it in a bundt pan. We've taken the same recipe and also turned it into muffins, which it worked pretty great. And then the icing we use is just a traditional icing. And we had some of filling with some chopped walnuts. You can certainly leave the walnuts out or substitute any other nut of your choice. Here's another one that we submitted that we did a demonstration for last year, and this is a 1-pot spinach broccoli pasta. What I love about spinach, it really can be added to almost any dish that you can imagine. And having frozen spinach on hand makes it a great way to just quickly pop in some vegetables into a dish, like a traditional pasta dish. Adding your vegetables to a pasta dish is an easy way and a lot of times blends in quite well. So here we have used a red onion, a bell pepper, some garlic cloves, broccoli, our pasta, chicken broth, and we have 4 cups of baby spinach and then some cheese of your choice. So you just cook it all together. What's nice about this is it is 1 pot. So once you cook your pasta, it's all nice and ready to go and less dishes for you at the end of it. Here's another great recipe. It's kind of a take on a gratin. And so it's a spinach leek and red pepper gratin. It uses fresh spinach, some leeks instead of onions, which is a nice alternative kind of taste that is a good available option. You certainly can use regular onions if you don't have leeks on hand. And then uses a cream cheese base using half and half. You can certainly substitute out any type of milk for your half and half. And then it has some spices and seasonings. And the other thing is here are roasted red peppers. You can certainly roast your own red peppers at home, either under your broiler or if you have a gas stove kind of over top of your flame in the gas stove. You certainly can buy roasted red peppers jarred and already seeded and chopped and ready to go as well. And then it's got kind of a breadcrumb Parmesan sprinkle on top. This works as a great appetizer because of the red and the green. It also makes a nice holiday dish. So you can give this one a try. And then the last one, as we kind of roll into berry season here in the next few months, berries go really well with our salads. And so our leafy greens, like our spinach and berries, excuse me, tend to pair really well together. So here we have just any type of cooked pasta of your choice, some baby spinach, berries of your choice again. Personally, I love blueberries and strawberries. They tend to hold up a little bit better than like our raspberries, which are a little bit softer of a berry, but you could do any combination of berries you like. Green onion and red onion kind of just adds that nice flavor. And then we have our almonds. Again, any type of nut would work. And we've added goat cheese in this. You could certainly leave the cheese out, or you can substitute any of your favorite cheeses as well. And the dressing is just kind of a traditional mayonnaise cider vinegar dressing with some lemon juice, a little honey to cut some of that cider taste, and then salt and pepper. You certainly can add your own fresh herbs if you have some other fresh herbs. This one calls for basil, but you can experiment and add some of the herbs as well to that dressing during the coating process. If you are using this as a side dish, you might want to omit the chicken, but if it's kind of as a main dish, you certainly could use chicken or any other type of poultry or canned or whatever. It might work. Even some fish would probably be good in this salad. So with that, that is the end of this nutrition portion. As always, here is our contact information. Feel free to submit any questions that you may have. And National Spinach Day is actually coming up. I believe it is March 26th or 27th. It's here next week. So we will have kind of a spinach smoothie recipe that we're putting out on our social media as our recipe of the month. I didn't mention it in this presentation, but spinach in smoothies is a great way to get some of the extra nutrients. And because it's such a mild flavor and such a soft kind of buttery texture compared to kale or some of those other hardier leafy greens, you don't even really notice that it's there besides a slight color change of the ingredients that you're mixing it with for your smoothies. So it's another great way to get spinach into your diet through smoothies. All right. So there was a question on, can you not cook the spinach for the drying process? You can not cook the spinach for the drying process. However, the quality might be a little bit less. So that cooking, anytime we're doing our vegetables, it is nice to blanch them because it does stop that degradation process and it helps to kind of lock in that color. So if you don't cook the spinach before drying it, you just might have a kind of decrease in quality in terms of color as well as the texture, but you certainly can do that. You would also have a different drying time because you aren't pre-cooking it. So if you do cook or if you do dry without cooking, you'll just have to watch and adjust your drying time and just note that that color and quality might be just a little bit different. And then there's a couple questions for you, Anthony.
All right, thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, we do have a few other questions in here pertaining to the growing stuff. Debbie asks, are greens grown about the same as spinach? And the answer is yes. You do want to keep in mind that greens are in the Brassicaceae family and spinach more so in the, not necessarily in the amaranth family, but very close. So they do have a little bit, different growing patterns, especially when it comes to like crop rotation. You want to keep that in mind because there'll be different types of crops, but they are planted at the same time of year. You do want to definitely keep the same kind of variety considerations in mind, especially when it comes to bolt resistant and heat resistant types. Then obviously your greens are going to be bigger plants as well, so this spacing is going to be a little bit different, but they do generally grow about the same. There's another one here from Mr. B. He asks, can fall crops be started indoors and planted outdoors when the weather cools? That is a possibility, yes, but you want to keep in mind that spinach has very delicate, shallow roots. So when you are transplanting those plugs or those starts, you want to be very gentle, very delicate, very careful. Definitely observe the whole process of just gradually introducing it outdoors before they go outdoors. And then also you may even just try to directly throw those plugs into the ground without really enter or disturbing those roots at all. let them go ahead and root out on their own, and don't try to break the roots whatsoever. Then I believe there's one other question here. Uh, and it says, will there be a copy of the presentation? We will try to get a PDF of the presentations out along with the recording. Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining us this week. Our topic next month is all about tomatoes. So we are going to delve into the world of tomatoes and the best ways to grow them. There's a lot to go over with that because it's one of the most popular crops that are grown, right? So we're going to definitely explore everything we can with those. But thank you for joining us. The recording will be online within the next week or so. So have a good day.